On today's show, could the Warriors trade for Nic Claxton before the trade deadline? What other Nets veterans could be on the move? How should fans feel about the rookie's development thus far? I'll answer all those fan questions and more on today's episode of Locked On Nets.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's episode, it's part 2 of a Christmas weekend Fan Take Friday. I took questions and takes from Nets fans on a wide range of subjects, recorded part 1 earlier in the day. Getting into part 2 right now, so rolling on into it. Got a lot of trade questions. First one, the Warriors reportedly have interest in Nic Claxton. Do you think they are a viable trade partner for the Nets there? What could a deal look like? That is from Nate Thomas. And yes, there has been a report from Chris Haynes. He was talking about the Warriors and potential win-now moves that they could be making ahead of the deadline and said that they are interested in 3 centers he named. And Nic Claxton was one of them. Also Daniel Gafford from the Mavs and Robert Williams from the Trailblazers. So there has been a little bit of smoke surrounding Nic Claxton, obviously with his start that he's had to the season, one of the better starts of his career, probably the best offensive start of his career. There is going to be trade interest leading up to the deadline. That's something that I've reported, a lot of other people have talked about, and really it's just common sense at this point. And the Warriors are a team that does have a need at center and obviously is struggling as of late, but is trying to win now around Steph Curry. So if you talk about them with the Nets, could they be a viable trade partner for the Nets? I mean, the Warriors definitely have enough stuff to, get a deal done for Nic Claxton. They have mid-sized contracts. They have all of their first-round picks moving forward. Like, they can swing a deal. I'm just not sure how clean of a fit it is and how motivated the Nets are going to be to go after, how motivated the Warriors are going to be to present the Nets a package that really blows them away. I mean, if you look at the Warriors in terms of just the salary matching, it could get a little complicated because Jonathan Kuminga is one, guy who's an easy salary filler for Nic Claxton. Like, that almost gets you all the way there in terms of money, but the Nets don't have interest in Jonathan Kuminga. I mean, I've reported that there was talks about him, obviously, with the Nets having league-leading cap space this past offseason, him being the top restricted free agent out there, or one of the top guys. Could they go after him? They didn't go after him. They didn't have interest. So I don't think that they would have any interest in him outside of him just being like a salary filler, and in that case, like not a guy who they're really seeing as like the value piece of the trade package. So the Warriors would have to give up Kuminga and probably something on top of him in terms of draft capital to get a deal done for Claxton. I probably don't think they're going to be looking to do that. They're probably going to try to find a team that has some kind of value for Kuminga, which the Nets don't. And if you're not talking about Kuminga outside of that, they have mid-sized contracts, but it gets into having to be like a 3-for-1 or a 3-for-2 because they don't have anybody else who's making like that $20 million or above range. So it would have to be, if you look at the Warriors cap sheet, a deal like Moses Moody, Buddy Hield, Al Horford, like those 3 guys get you there for Nic Claxton, but like a 3-for-1 trade that usually doesn't happen. Could you add in somebody else from the Nets and then add in somebody else from the Warriors? Like, it just gets really complicated and convoluted. So sure, like the Warriors have the assets in terms of draft capital to get a deal done for Nic Claxton, but the money matching could get a little complicated. And I think that is mainly tied to the fact that the Nets don't seem to have any interest in a guy like Jonathan Kuminga. So could the two sides swing a deal? Definitely. I just think that it could get a little complicated. I also do think there should be some other teams that have interest in Nic Claxton, but this just is like, this is kind of that confirmation that teams are probably looking at what Nic Claxton is doing. Career best scoring numbers, career best assist numbers, has been really efficient as a hub big man for the Nets. And the defense has started to come around as of late, with the Nets being the best defensive team in the NBA in December. So teams are going to have interest in Nic Claxton. Do the Nets want to move off him? That's to be determined, but I definitely think that they're going to, at least gauge offers for him and see what they can get, as they definitely should do. Next question. Hey, Erik, thanks for providing Nets content all year long. Thank you for listening. My question is, who do you expect to still be on the roster after the trade deadline outside of the rookies? And how many moves at or before the trade deadline do you expect the Nets to make? That is from James Jeffries. And it's interesting to look at this because if you look at the Nets roster, like who do I definitely still do I still expect to be on the roster after the trade deadline? There's really, outside of the rookies, there's really only two guys. It's Terrence Mann and Noah Clowney, because I don't think the Nets are going to trade Noah Clowney and anything short of a star package. And even in a star package, they'd probably try to hold on to him as one of the younger type building block guys, but they might have to give up on him, give him up in that scenario. But outside of Noah Clowney, Terrence Mann, because he's, a guy who's a veteran, and I definitely think they would trade him, but I think that he's a negative value contract on the deal that he's on right now. He has 2 years left after this at around $15 or $16 million annually. So I think that they would have to attach something to his contract to move him. Could he be maybe moved as a salary filler in some kind of deal? Like, it's not out of the range of possibilities, but I don't think that teams want to saddle themselves with that contract. So Terrence Mann and Noah Clowney are the only guys who I would say are definitely still going to be on the roster. Beyond that, you have the impact veterans like Michael Porter Jr., like Nic Claxton, Day'Ron Sharpe. Like, I wouldn't at all be surprised if the Nets traded one of those guys, maybe even multiple of those guys. But I would say out of that group, you're probably going to have multiple of those guys back, if not all of them. I mean, they could all be here past the trade deadline. And then you have the guys like Haywood Highsmith, like Cam Thomas, like Zaire Williams. I think there's a pretty good chance that those guys could get moved, or multiple of those guys. I think Cam Thomas is the most likely. So only guys I definitely see being back after the trade deadline for sure are Terrence Mann and Noah Clowney. And outside of that, anybody on this Nets roster, any of these other remaining veterans, outside of the rookies, I think are definitely fair game to be included in trade conversations. In terms of how many moves do I expect the Nets to make, I would expect the Nets to be active on the trade market, gauging offers for their veterans, because nobody should be untouchable at this point. And I also think that I expect to see them leverage their cap space, around the league. That's a big talk right now. The Nets have, $50 million in cap space, and they are looking to use it to help teams shed money, to help facilitate larger trades, to add to their league-leading asset pool. They have, 12 or 13 first-round picks over the next 7 years. They have 18 second-round picks. So they're trying to add to that, and their cap space and leveraging that is going to be a main way that they look to do that. So I would expect to see probably multiple moves. I'd probably say I'd expect to move on the veteran trade front from the Nets, and then also probably the salary dump front. So that's how I'm seeing that. Next question, is the Day'Ron Sharpe trade inevitable considering who's ahead of him as well as who's behind him? And that's from Jiffy Leaks. I don't at all think that a Day'Ron Sharpe trade is inevitable. Do I think that he's going to be a guy who could be shopped? Yes. And I think that he could be easier to move than a guy like Nic Claxton, because the Nets are probably going to have to make a decision on, you look at their front court, I've said it, if they're trying to go the tanking route, their front court's just too good right now. I mean, they have Michael Porter Jr., Noah Clowney, Nic Claxton as that starting front court trio. That group has posted a positive net rating, well above positive during their minutes together this season. So that's fueling a lot of their success, is that added size in the front court. And then behind that, you have Day'Ron Sharpe and Danny Wolf coming off the bench. And I mean, Danny Wolf has played really well, obviously struggled more as of late, but he's been an impact guy since entering the rotation, a floor raiser. And then Day'Ron Sharpe, the same thing. I mean, we saw Nic Claxton get in foul trouble in the first quarter of that 76ers game, and Day'Ron Sharpe came in and he completely turned the tide of that first quarter and really led the Nets back into that game. He had 6, 4, and 4 on 3 of 4 shooting in eight first quarter minutes. So he's an impact guy. And with all of those guys in the front court, I mean, MPJ, Clowney, Claxton, Wolf, Sharpe, that's a lot of guys that you probably don't need to have all those guys on a tanking roster, obviously. And moving forward, there's just some overlap between all of those dudes. So I would say that I don't think a Day'Ron Sharpe trade is inevitable, but I definitely think that he's a guy who teams will have interest in, and he's going to be more easily movable compared to a guy like Michael Porter Jr. or Nic Claxton, just because of the salary figure. I mean, you look at MPJ is making $37 million. Nic Claxton is making $25 million. It restricts the pool of teams that are going to look to trade for a guy like that, because you're going to have to give up more in terms of the salary fillers, also probably definitely in terms of draft assets. So that just restricts the number of teams that are trying to make a move like that. Whereas you look at Day'Ron Sharpe, he's a guy who could be had probably for second-round picks, is only making $6 million. So you can match the salary super easily. A trade like that is open to almost every team in the league. So I don't think that a Day'Ron Sharpe trade is inevitable, but I think it's very much on the table. And there were teams, I reported it leading up to last year's trade deadline, there were a lot of teams, including the Los Angeles Lakers, who showed interest in Day'Ron as a trade target. And I do think that those teams will probably remain interested this year, and it could be even more teams outside of that. So we'll see how that plays out. Last question before a break. What's the likelihood of Cam Thomas being on the team next season, since he has no interest around the league? And that's from VRO. I said this. I think the odds of Cam Thomas being on the team, even past the trade deadline, I think are very slim. I think, the writing's on the wall with Cam Thomas. I think that it's pretty clear. I mean, I don't necessarily think the Nets have been extremely high on him. I think that's kind of been clear as to how they navigated the first few years of his career and then also how they navigated this offseason with his contract negotiations. And I think it was pretty clear based on the draft. And I mean, they made all of these picks, a lot of guards, and they said, or ball handlers, and they said, Sean Mark said after the draft, guys who keep the ball moving, guys who are big, positionally versatile, make things tough on defense. Everything that he described was pretty much the antithesis of Cam Thomas. And then you start the season out, then it's 0-7 with Thomas in the lineup. They have one of the worst defensive ratings in NBA history. And then he exits the lineup. They bring Noah Clowney in his spot, and they've completely turned around. So is that all a product of Cam Thomas moving out of the lineup? No. But it definitely doesn't look good for Cam Thomas that they were 0-7 with one of the worst defensive ratings in NBA history. And then he goes out of the lineup and the Nets turn it around fairly quickly. So I just don't think that, Cam Thomas really makes much sense on this roster moving forward. I think that they're probably going to work with his representation to see, what transpires in terms of a trade. I talked about it recently. Cam on last Saturday, did 5-on-5 work. The Nets didn't put a return target date for him. So I think that they're probably looking to hold him out indefinitely and work on trades with his representation, but we'll get more information on that leading up to the trade deadline. But I do not expect Cam to be on the roster past the trade deadline or past or this coming season, as you asked. But that's all I got for this first segment. We got a lot more questions on Nic Claxton, on MPJ, on some of the other rookie development and how fans should be looking at that. So I'll get into all that when I continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, the season's heating up, and DoorDash has a way to keep fans in their bag all the way through. Whether you're watching the highlights, the tunnel fits, or just your favorite player, DoorDash makes the entire season more fun because every player has their bag. With DoorDash, fans have one too. DoorDash keeps your snacks stocked, your gear fresh, and your watch party vibes absolutely on point. Guys, there are nights where your team stresses you out. Let DoorDash become your post-game therapy. Sometimes you just need that dessert now. Those late-night interviews hit, and suddenly you need chips at midnight. DoorDash is built for exactly that. If the group chat says pull up, DoorDash makes sure you show up prepared. Snacks, cups, even a phone charger for the friend who's always at 2%. So from tip-off to overtime, stay in your bag and order on DoorDash. Get snacks, drinks, gear, whatever gets you through the season, delivered right to your door. DoorDash, in your bag all season long. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, this part tour of a Fan Take Friday, rolling on through all your remaining takes and questions. Next question: What lottery team would be most open to trading their pick this year? OKC for future collateral. Pacers want Clax plus MPJ to fit alongside Hallie next year. Crazier things have happened. That is from Kimball Prime. And what lottery teams do I think could be open to moving their picks? I think that you have to look at the teams who are in win now mode and who are already like contenders or close to it. And I think the two teams that you named make a lot of sense in that regard. OKC, who obviously have the pick via the Los Angeles Clippers, and then the Indiana Pacers. Do I think that it means that those teams are going to move those picks? Not necessarily, but I think that they would be maybe open to it as opposed to all of these other teams who are just going to like laugh you off the phone unless you give up something really crazy. But if you look at a team like OKC, like they're probably trying to turn, or not probably, they're definitely like they're trying to build this out as a dynasty. So having another really good cost-controlled player, that could make a lot of sense, or that does make a lot of sense, especially in this new CBA where they're going to have to pay a lot of guys. They're going to have to make concessions. If you add another impact player into the mix, a top 8 type guy in this draft that's very highly regarded at the top, and you get that guy cost controlled on a rookie contract for the next 4 years, that could be a huge asset to elongating, this dynasty run that they're trying to go on. So I've heard a lot of Nets fans talking about the OKC pick. Would the Nets, could the Nets give up multiple first round picks and try to get that? Could they give up somebody on their roster and try to get that? I mean, OKC's struggling a little bit as of late, struggling like relative to, their crazy start, but could they have interest in a guy like Clax or MPJ? Maybe, probably more so MPJ, but I don't really see them rocking the boat with their rotation. So I think it's pretty unlikely that they would trade for one of those guys. And then if you talk about would they trade, would they take multiple of the Nets picks for their, lottery pick this year, presumably that they're going to have? It's possible, maybe the Nets could offer up that 2032 Denver first, which is perceived to have a good amount of value, and then some other first round picks to move up. it's not out of the question, but I just think it's unlikely because I think adding a player who can be an impact guy for these next 3-4 years on a rookie contract, that's a huge asset for a team like OKC that shouldn't be able to do something like that. So it's possible, but I don't think it's that likely for the Pacers. Same thing. Like, I think just adding guys cost control in this new CBA, especially in a draft that's really highly regarded, at the top, it's going to take a lot to get teams to move off of those picks. So the Nets have the capital to get into those conversations. I just don't know if they're going to give up what would be necessary to make those trades for picks like that, which would probably be like a Godfather offer that they would have to make. So that's how I'm seeing that. Next question, is Terrence Mann's contract immovable until it becomes an expiring? That's from Jiffy Leaks. I wouldn't say it's immovable. I mean, the Nets could definitely attach assets to it and probably try to move it. If you're talking about next year where he has, 1 year left after that, I think you could get into a conversation of maybe they can use it more easily as a salary filler there. Are they going to get positive value for it? I don't think so. I mean, Terrence Mann hasn't been playing terrible lately. He's playing all right. I mean, he's shooting the ball better from three. He's been, pretty efficient offensively in terms of assist to turnover ratio. He's been a guy who I don't think has been like a negative at all for this Nets team. I just don't think he's a huge positive either. But I think that, his contract, it's probably immovable right now, short of attaching assets to it. Will that change? I mean, the closer you get to it being an expiring, it's going to become less and less more difficult to move it. So I don't think it's immovable, but I think that the Nets are probably stuck with it at least until next season and maybe until it becomes an expiring where they wouldn't have to attach anything to get off of it. So that's how I'm seeing that. Next question. Happy holidays. Happy holidays to you as well. Who has been your favorite Nets player to interact with this year so far? And that's from Deffy. Interesting question. And I'd say that there's, a bunch of guys, like especially in the rookie class, I would say that the guy that I probably had the most fun interacting with is Yegor Dioman. He's just a very smart, a very friendly, a very insightful kid, like has a great head on his shoulders. When you ask him things, he just has great answers. And I think that, he's very, he takes a very hard look at himself and he's very like introspective about what he's doing and the player that he's trying to grow into. And that's a big part of what attracted the Nets to him. And I understand that. I mean, they've talked about it in the draft process and not just the Nets. Like I was at the combine last year. I talked to a lot of people, from other teams, and a lot of them just said that Yegor Dioman crushed it in the interviews because he's just such a smart kid and he had such a good head on his shoulders. He had so much self-awareness of the player that he wants to be moving forward and what it's going to take to get there. And that's huge. Like that can't be discounted. I mean, for a player, as I've said, I talked about on my last episode, who has some pretty clear tools as a 6'9" guy who can shoot it seems like at a pretty high level, has some defensive versatility, and has passing ability that you can look to unlock, has all of those tools. And then if you also have the intangibles and that he's going to work hard, he's going to be about all the right things, that's really attractive. And I can see why the Nets were attracted to a guy like him during the draft process. And my interactions with him thus far this season, just a really good kid. Has great answers whenever you ask him anything. And then even like outside of just the immediate availability sessions is always around to come and like talk to you, have conversations about things, like gives you, his point of view on stuff. Just a really good kid. And I've really enjoyed interacting with him. Outside of him, I'd say Danny Wolf also. Like I had Danny on the podcast, another really good kid, another really smart kid, just guys who really have good heads on their shoulders, as do all of these Nets rookies and a lot of the veterans as well. So I've had a lot of fun getting to know this whole Nets team, but especially the rookie class that they brought in. Next question, how much of the Nets defensive turnaround this month can be attributed to their extra days off? And that's from TJ Ramsey 44. And a really interesting question, because this is something that I've talked about with people, around the league. I've talked about it with some Nets people, and just they've had a really advantageous schedule in terms of the teams that they've been facing and also the time off that they've had. I mean, as you've said, like I have not covered a Nets season thus far. Like this is my 4th season on the beat, and I haven't covered a season where they've had this much time off. Like they had the 1 week where they had 6 days off. They had another week where they had 4 days off. Now they have this week where they have 3 days off. And if you look at it, like these last 2 weeks, they've been home pretty much the whole time. They had to travel to Philadelphia. I mean, that's pretty much a home game. I mean, you just have to go on the bus down, down the turnpike. And then you look at it now, they're traveling to Minnesota, and now they're going to start to have some road games against some more difficult, some more challenging opponents. So how much of their defensive turnaround can be attributed to their extra days off? I think, definitely some of it. I mean, it's easier to play when you have a lot of days off and you're not traveling as much and you're playing against easier opponents. So that's some of it. And I think a lot of it is just them having, better effort, better engagement, them tweaking the defensive scheme a little bit and having more understanding of what they're trying to do, defensively. So I think that that's a big part of it, but I do think that the schedule can't be discounted. So that's how I'm seeing that. Next take before a quick break. I'm ready to declare Michael Porter Jr. my favorite athlete right now, and that's from Henry Jabel. And a lot of Nets fans, seem to be very high on Michael Porter Jr. Obviously, he's doing a lot for this Nets team right now. He's carrying the load. He's far exceeded expectations of what I think any fans or maybe even the team could have expected when they traded for him as that, salary dump from the Denver Nuggets. But he's going to be a player who it's going to be interesting to see how the Nets approach it, because I've said it about him. He is young enough to be a part of the next iteration of this Nets team. He's going to be 28 at the end of the season. You could build forward with him. You also, there's a very real world where you could say, look, his value right now, he's playing the best he ever has in his career. He's the healthiest he's ever been in his career. This could be, the peak of his value. And you could say, we could trade him, we could get positive value for him, and we could take a huge step towards trying to maximize our chances of getting into the top of the draft lottery standing. So I can see it both ways. I understand both sides of the equation, but Henry, as is the case for you, it seems like a lot of Nets fans are really high on what MPJ is doing right now, and rightfully so. I mean, the guy's been unbelievable. He's averaging, 26 points per game on 50, 40, 80 shooting splits. He's playing like an all-star and one of the best players in the league right now. So it's been really fun to watch MPJ, and it's going to be really interesting to see how the Nets, approach him leading up to the trade deadline. So will be interesting to see how that goes. But I got a few more questions, mostly about the Nets rookies. How should fans feel about their development? And should fans be encouraged about what Jordi Fernandez and this player development staff has done with them thus far? So I'll get into all that when I close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, during basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building, the energy, the crowd, that first big run that gets everyone on their feet. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. That's where Game Time comes in. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets, fast, simple, and without the guesswork. Guys, browsing the Game Time app is straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets takes just a few taps. Seeing the view from your seat before buying makes choosing tickets easy and confident. Prices are including fees up front, so the total is clear from the start, and features like zone deals help unlock great seats at even better value. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app and get in on the action. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode on this Fan Take Friday. Rolling on through all of your remaining takes and questions. Next one, big if, I know, but if Ben Suraf has fixed his jumper, is the rest of his game good enough for him to become an NBA rotation player on a good team? In my opinion, other than his shooting, he just has to be more careful with the ball and stop turning it over so much. That's from Solidarity Forever. And, Ben Suraf is playing pretty good basketball in the G League as of late. He obviously had that 40-point game recently on Monday in the G League where he was 6 of 10 from three. It was the best shooting game that he's had as a pro. I wrote about it after it. It was the first time that he's ever made 6 threes in a professional game. He made 6 threes once when he was 17 years old, I think, when he was playing for Israel in a national game. But on the professional level, first time that he's ever made 6 threes in a game. And Ben has struggled, obviously. He struggled. He shot around 27% through his 4 pro seasons internationally from 3. He shot around 27% thus far during his NBA appearances. But he's shooting 44% from 3 on 6 or 7 attempts per 100 possessions in the G League thus far through 8 G League appearances. And then a lot of that is a product of he shot 6 of 10 during this last game. And if you watched it, they were playing against the Oklahoma City Blue at the G League Showcase, and they were playing a zone defense for pretty much the whole game. And Ben Suraf was getting space from 3, and he was more than willing to let it fly, and he was cashing in on a lot of them. So if Ben Suraf can develop his 3-point shot, that's going to be huge. And I talked to Ben. The Nets called him up for the Philadelphia game. He didn't play, but he was up with the team. And I talked to him in the locker room after that game, and he said that, he's been working on his jumper a lot. He said that he's been working with the shooting coach, Dave Love. Dr. Dave Love is what a lot of people call him. And he said that they tweaked some things with his mechanics since the summer, and he's been feeling a lot better about his jump shot. And he's shooting, 44% on high volume or on decently high volume in the G League so far. So that is a really positive development. And if he can fix that shooting, I'd be really high on what Ben Suraf can be as a player moving forward, because you've seen it. Ben's a guy who's proven that he can create advantages against NBA level defenders. I mean, we've seen he has this really interesting, pretty explosive first step, pretty quick. He has a really nice crossover. He has the spin moves. He has the decels. He has a lot of that. If you can unlock the three-point shooting, which I think could go a long way to unlock that downhill juice that he has, he's going to have, I think a good amount of scoring ability. And then he is a good passer. He just needs to get a little bit more comfortable, developing a little bit of an in-between game against NBA-level defenders, when he gets shut off on drives or when he gets into that mid-range area. Because a lot of what Ben did internationally, like he had a lot of like a spin move or a bump to a jumper, a mid-range jumper and stuff like that. And those shots are going to be much harder to get off against NBA-level defenders. So if he can develop a little bit more craft and play with a little bit more, like tempo in the mid-range of the game, I think that that'll go a long way to unlock his passing ability and also accentuate the scoring gifts that he does have. So if Ben Suraf can develop the three-point shooter, I do think there's a very real world where he could be a rotation player on a good NBA team. Next question. Which of the rookies is most likely to have a Clowney-esque jump in year 2? That's from Tyler the Torch. And if I had to say, I'd probably say Danny Wolf, just because he's the oldest. I mean, Danny's already older than Noah Clowney, so he's much further along in his development than the rest of these Nets rookies who are 19 years old. So I say, Clowney's made a huge jump this year. I think Danny Wolf is playing well in the beginning. He's starting to struggle a little bit right now. I think it's going to be up and down during his rookie campaign, but next season, I think that he's going to be, 22 years old. He's going to have a year of basketball under his belt. He's going to have a much more developed body. He already does. He's going to continue to development. So it's going to be much further along physically in terms of the skills also as compared to the rest of these Nets rookies. So I'd say him. And then outside of him, I think Yegor Dioman's a guy who, could really figure it out, as is Drake Powell. Like a lot of these Nets guys, these Nets rookies have a lot of interesting tools in their games. And I'm really excited to see how they move forward developmentally with Jordan Fernandez and this staff. Next question or next take. Merry Christmas, Erik. Thanks for all the podcasts. Really appreciate your efforts and hard work. That's from AFT Beta. And appreciate you, man. I appreciate all of you guys and girls who come on and listen to this podcast, and all of you who just support it because it lets me do this job, and it's been really fun. It's honestly a dream come true to be able to do this for a living. And, you guys are the best. You guys continue to support my work, my writing, my podcasting, my social media stuff. So thank you to all of you, and hope all of you are having a great holidays. Next question, is Grant Nelson hurt? I have not seen him in the box score for Long Island in a while. That's from ABC WUU. I'm actually not sure if Grant Nelson is dealing with anything down in Long Island. I will find out about that, but I have seen Grant Nelson around the Nets facility in Brooklyn, so he is around the Nets team, and I know that he's doing stuff with the Nets. Like, he's obviously with Long Island. He's just been hurt and he hasn't played there. So I'll get some more confirmation on that, but I'm not sure as of now if he's hurt or not. Next question. Are you satisfied with how often Nolan Traore is getting into the paint with his speed? I was expecting him to live there and maybe miss a lot of layups or get blocked a lot. Instead, he's almost as bad as Yegor, stopping his drive as soon as there's any resistance at all on the perimeter. That's from fans of Sector 2814. And I'd say that, I've been happy, like in Nolan's NBA appearances, like he's been able to get downhill. I've said it, like I'm just looking for with these Nets rookies, do their top skills play at the NBA level? And Nolan's top asset is his speed, and his speed definitely sticks out. Like in these last 2 games, he has plays where he's just a blur and he's just blowing past guys and leaving NBA defenders in the dust. So he can definitely get into the paint. I'm satisfied with that. If you're talking about, once he gets there, like I think you're right in your assessment that he has a lot of work. I talked about this on my last podcast, but he really struggled during the first half of that 76ers game because they were in that drop coverage with Joel Embiid and Andre Drummond sitting down there. Once Nolan turned the corner on these screens, he was getting into the paint, and he didn't really he was very hesitant. He stopped. He didn't want to attack those guys at the rim, which is understandable because him going full tilt and challenging a Joel Embiid or an Andre Drummond at the rim, it's not the best way to go about it, but that's why you need more of the in-between game. You need the mid-range game. You need to be able to go from fast to slow, slow to fast, work into that mid-range and have some more craft, similar to what I was talking about with Ben Suraf. And that's just something with, Ben Suraf, Nolan Traore, Yegor Dioman, all of these guys, like that's going to come with more reps. These guys are still figuring it out. They're still finding their games, and having that craft in the mid-range, especially for a guy like Nolan Traore, who's the smallest of these guys. He's a little bit of a slighter frame. He can get enveloped in the paint kind of quickly. That's probably going to take the most time for a guy like him. So I'm happy with how Nolan has been getting downhill. But once he gets there into the paint, yeah, you'd like to see him be willing to, kind of probe or take a mid-step, take a sidestep dribble, see where his dump-offs or where his kickouts out, or be willing to take the pull-up jumper or the floater when he has miles of space. So all of that stuff is stuff that Nolan needs to improve on, and I think that he will with added reps. And then also, like if you're just talking about his ability to get into the paint, I think that it has been encouraging thus far. So that's how I'm seeing that. Last question. Does it make sense to keep Ben Surratt, Drake Powell when he's back, and Nolan Troy down in the G League so they can get more burn until we make some more trades? That's from BK Troll. And I don't necessarily think it makes more sense to keep them down in the G League. I mean, if you talk about a guy like Ben Surratt, I think that he's showing encouraging flashes in the G League right now, and he was struggling in a pretty big way during his NBA minutes. So it could make more sense to keep him down there and get him more reps, especially since I think it's going to be hard, especially before the trade deadline, to get reps for all three of the rookie point guards with Yegor Dioma, Nolan Troy, Ben Surratt. You're probably looking at only having two of those three guys in the rotation. So right now, it seems like Ben's the odd man out, but you just had a 40-point performance in the G League, so that could flip. Nolan, had some good moments, had some struggles during this last game, so we'll see. But I think probably two of those 3 point guards are going to be up. If you talk about a guy like Drake Powell, I think that he should be up with the NBA team. I don't really think there's much reason to put him down in the G League because he's proven that he can play, he can defend at the NBA level. He's shown, encouraging flashes as a shot creator, as a facilitator, a lot of stuff. So with the way that he's played with all of these Nets rookies, if they look comfortable in the NBA and they don't look like they're getting just kind of like embarrassed or they're getting, it's going to be bad for their confidence to keep them up there and getting NBA minutes. If that's not the case, they should be up in the NBA. And Drake Powell, Yegor Dioma, Danny Wolf, I think the 3 are clear. Those guys should be up with the NBA team. And then Nolan Troy and Ben Surratt, they've been up and down, and they've both shown flashes. So we'll see how that moves forward. But I would expect towards the trade deadline for some moves to be made, and then there to be some, more rookies getting more consistent minutes. But that's all I got for you guys on today's Locked On Nets episode. This part 2 of the Fan Take Friday, and having to do 2 parts of Fan Take Friday, that just speaks to, how much engagement, how many people are submitting questions to the mailbag, whether, on Twitter, on my email, DMing me. I mean, I've got over 50 questions for this Fan Take Friday. That's the most that I've ever gotten by far. So thank you to all of you who continue to submit questions because it allows me to keep doing these mailbag episodes, and they've been really fun. I really enjoy doing them, and they're obviously getting a really nice response amongst all you guys. So thank you. But if you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy the content, take a second right now, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. But the Nets are back in action on Saturday on the road against the Minnesota Timberwolves. A pretty tough test. They've had some easy games as of late. They've had a lot of success. Now they're going to face one of the better teams in the NBA. So I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back on Monday talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.